I still remember the gleam in Mike Donovan's eyes when he called me into his office that Tuesday morning. The sun streamed through the tall windows of Stratus Aerotech, catching on the award plaques I'd helped the company earn. 7 years of my life spent building their biggest contract, a $180 million deal with the Department of Defense for advanced drone technology. 7 years of late nights, missed weekends, and a network of contacts I'd carefully cultivated from nothing. "Rachel, we're implementing some strategic restructuring," Mike said, not even looking me in the eyes. His fingers drummed on my personnel file. "We're letting you go, effective immediately." My stomach dropped, but I kept my face perfectly still. I'd grown up working class in South Seattle. We didn't show pain. "Who's replacing me?" I asked, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside me. Mike's lips curled into what almost looked like a smirk, someone with fresher ideas. I nodded, gathering my dignity as I walked out. That's when I saw her, Claire Whitman, the CEO's daughter, walking into what used to be my office, carrying a latte and wearing a smile that said she'd just won a prize she never competed for. The next morning, an email hit everyone's inbox. Exciting leadership changes at Stratus. The message announced Claire Whitman as the new face of Stratus Innovation. My phone nearly exploded with messages from confused coworkers. Claire, with her fresh MBA and zero experience, was now managing the company's most complex federal contract, the one that accounted for 40% of Stratus's revenue. Claire, who'd once failed an internship at a cupcake shop because she couldn't handle the responsibility of opening on time. I stared at my laptop screen, reading the announcement twice to make sure it wasn't some kind of joke. But it wasn't. I'd been replaced by the ultimate act of nepotism. My phone pinged with a text from Claire herself. "Big shoes to fill, any tips?" I put my phone down without responding. She had no idea what she'd stepped into. The drone contract wasn't just paperwork. It was a complex web of security clearances, compliance frameworks, and relationships I'd built over years. But that wasn't my problem anymore, was it? 2 weeks passed, and the first cracks started showing. My old team members texted me daily. Claire had misfiled critical specifications. She'd missed a supplier meeting. She'd used the wrong security protocols for classified information. Growing pains, Mike had apparently told everyone when they raised concerns. She'll figure it out. But the DoD contract wasn't the place for training wheels. One missed deadline could trigger penalty clauses worth millions. One compliance error could shut down the entire project. The panic in my former colleagues' messages grew more urgent each day. Then came the forwarded email from Jason, my main contact at the Department of Defense. "This is a disaster. Who signed off on this compliance report? Where's Rachel?" I sipped my coffee, reading the message twice. Part of me felt validated. They were finally seeing my value. But another part felt a strange kind of sadness. I'd poured my heart into building something great, only to watch it crumble from the sidelines. But that was about to change. I hadn't really looked at my severance paperwork. The shock of being fired had left me numb, and I'd just signed what they put in front of me. But now, reading through it carefully at my kitchen table, something caught my eye. The documents listed my employment status not as a standard employee, but as a temporary external contractor through Miller Compliance Solutions LLC. My own company. I'd set up this LLC 3 years earlier during a budget scare, when Stratus had briefly converted some employees to contractors. When the crisis passed, most people were brought back as regular employees, but somehow I'd remained listed under my LLC. I dug through my files and found the original contract between Stratus and my company. What I saw made my heart race. The agreement gave my LLC exclusive consulting rights for the compliance framework I'd developed, the very one the entire DoD contract depended on. And Stratus was still using it. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The compliance framework, my framework, was proprietary. I'd built it from scratch, spending countless nights coding a system that could handle the complex web of federal regulations, security protocols, and technical specifications. And according to my contract, Stratus only had the right to use it while actively employing my services. I logged into the system remotely with my still active credentials, another oversight in their rush to get rid of me. There it was. They were still running my software, still using my compliance checklists, still following my protocols. I'd created this system to protect the company from the million ways a government contract could go wrong. The irony wasn't lost on me. Now it would protect me from them. I called my lawyer, Tom, a sharp-minded contract specialist who'd helped me set up my LLC years ago. "They're in breach," he said after reviewing everything. "Big time." Meanwhile, Claire was sinking fast. A former teammate sent me a recording of a visionary leadership meeting Claire had hosted. She spoke in buzzwords that made no sense, referred to drones as those flying camera things, and then shared the wrong procurement document with everyone. When a contractor pointed out that she'd missed a critical deadline, the entire video call went silent. Her face drained of color. "That can't be right," she stammered. Mr. Whitman, assured me everything was on track. After the call, my old analyst Priya messaged me, "You didn't hear this from me, but they're about to lose the contract. The DoD is furious." I felt strangely calm as I digested this news. I hadn't asked for any of this. I'd been loyal, effective, and committed to Stratus for 7 years, and they'd thrown me away without a second thought, handed my life's work to someone unqualified, all because of who her father was. It was time they learned that actions have consequences. With Tom's help, I drafted a cease and desist letter. It was professional, precise, and ice-cold. I outlined exactly how Stratus was in breach of contract by continuing to use my proprietary compliance framework without proper licensing or compensation. I also included my final invoice, the one they'd forgotten to pay when they fired me. With the late fees specified in our original contract, it came to just over $87,000. I sent it to Stratus's legal team, with copies to Mike Donovan and Ed Whitman, the CEO. "This will get their attention," Tom assured me. "But be prepared. They might try to fight it." I wasn't worried. I had documentation for everything, including emails where Mike had explicitly acknowledged my framework as proprietary. 3 hours after I sent the letter, my phone rang. It was Jason from the DoD. "Rachel, can you confirm who owns the IP behind the compliance framework for our project? We're getting some concerning information." It didn't take long for the dominoes to start falling. Within 48 hours, the Department of Defense put the entire contract under review. The letter cited unresolved legal questions regarding intellectual property rights and compliance certification. Stratus's stock dropped 14% overnight. Claire was removed as point of contact for the DoD project, replaced by a senior VP who had no idea how the systems worked. I didn't have to imagine the panic inside those glass office towers. I could see it reflected in the company-wide emails that kept getting leaked to me by former teammates, emergency meetings, demands for answers. Ed Whitman, red-faced, shouting at the legal team. Tom called me the next morning. "That got their attention," he said, sounding impressed. "Their lawyer just reached out. They want to negotiate a resolution." I thought about it for a moment. "Tell them I'm open to discussion," I replied. "But the compliance framework isn't for sale, and the invoice needs to be paid in full before any talks begin." It wasn't about money. It was about respect. To my surprise, Mike Donovan himself called me the next day. His voice had lost its usual arrogant edge. "Rachel, I think there's been a misunderstanding," he said, sounding almost friendly. "We've always valued your contributions. I personally always saw your potential." I let the silence stretch uncomfortably long before responding. "Is that why you fired me without warning after 7 years of service?" He stammered something about budget constraints and restructuring needs. "The invoice is attached to the cease and desist letter," I said calmly. "Let me know when it's been paid in full." I hung up before he could respond. Then I took a deep breath and dialed a number I hadn't called in nearly 2 years. "David, it's Rachel Miller. You once said if I ever wanted to work with a company that valued integrity, your door was open." I paused. "Are you still looking to win some federal contracts?" David Reeves, CEO of Phoenix Systems, laughed warmly. "Rachel, I thought you'd never ask." Meeting with David felt like stepping into a parallel universe, one where competence was actually valued. Phoenix Systems was smaller than Stratus, but growing fast, with a reputation for innovation and ethical business practices. David had tried to recruit me 2 years earlier, but I'd stayed loyal to Stratus, believing my hard work would eventually be recognized. What a joke that seemed now. "I'll be honest," David said, leaning forward across his office table. We've been eyeing some DoD work, but we haven't had the right expertise to navigate the compliance maze. He slid a folder across the desk. I opened it and saw the heading, Requisition 5C, DoD Tactical Drone Expansion Phase 2. It was the same project Stratus was about to lose, the next phase of my drone contract. Full autonomy, David offered. Build your team how you want, we'll back you completely. For the first time since being fired, I felt a genuine smile spread across my face. This wasn't just about getting even anymore. It was about building something better. Meanwhile, Stratus was self-destructing. Claire, desperate to prove herself, tried to handle a supplier negotiation alone. She accidentally sent a confidential internal strategy document to an external vendor, a clear violation of their non-disclosure agreement. The supplier immediately reported the breach, triggering another internal investigation at Stratus. The legal team was now fighting on multiple fronts: my IP claim, the DoD contract review, and now a serious NDA violation. My inside sources told me that Claire was falling apart under the pressure, while Ed Whitman was blaming everyone except his daughter for the company's mounting problems. Then came the most disturbing news. A junior associate at Stratus sent me an anonymous message. You should know, they're trying to pin the framework breach on a missing compliance contractor. They're saying you sabotaged the system before leaving. I forwarded the message to Tom. He wasn't concerned. Let them try, he said. We have the paper trail to prove they're lying. If they push this narrative, we'll add defamation to our claims. Stratus was getting desperate. According to my sources, they'd assembled a team to quickly recreate my compliance framework from scratch. They hoped that by replacing my system, they could argue they weren't using my intellectual property anymore. But compliance frameworks aren't built overnight. Mine had evolved over years, incorporating countless specific requirements from the DoD and various regulatory bodies. And I'd been careful. Each component contained a digital watermark only visible when you knew where to look. The DoD's system audit found those watermarks still embedded throughout Stratus's documentation. The hastily built replacement was flagged for critical inconsistencies and potential security vulnerabilities. That same day, I received a certified letter from Stratus formally contesting my ownership claim over the framework. They argued it had been developed as a work for hire and belonged exclusively to Stratus. When I showed Tom the letter, he actually smiled. They just opened the door to discovery, he said. Now we can demand all internal communications about your framework, including the ones where they explicitly acknowledged your ownership. The Department of Defense made its decision. The contract with Stratus was officially suspended pending resolution of the intellectual property dispute. All work was to cease immediately. Claire was permanently removed from any role related to government contracts. Ed Whitman issued a vague statement about internal transitions and temporary challenges, but the damage was done. Stratus had lost credibility with its biggest client. With Phoenix Systems, I was building something better. I recruited key talent I trusted, including Priya and 2 other former Stratus employees who'd reached out after seeing the chaos unfold. Together, we prepared a comprehensive bid for the Phase 2 drone contract. David gave me everything I needed: resources, autonomy, and most importantly, respect. We submitted our proposal to the DoD one day before Stratus's appeal hearing on my IP claim. The timing wasn't coincidental. While Stratus executives were tied up in legal proceedings, trying to claim ownership of my work, I was showing the DoD exactly what that work could accomplish with the right team behind it. Jason, my old contact at the DoD, called me directly after receiving our proposal. "This is impressive, Rachel," he said. "Exactly what we've been looking for." Then his voice dropped slightly. "You know, we warned Ed when he made the leadership change. We told him Claire wasn't you. He didn't listen." I wasn't surprised. Ed Whitman had always been blinded by his belief that his daughter was exceptional, despite all evidence to the contrary. "Their loss," I said simply. "Our technical team is fast-tracking your proposal," Jason continued. "Between us, you're the only ones who seem to actually understand what we need." After we hung up, I sat quietly at my desk, looking out at Phoenix's more modest but warm office space. There was no elaborate artwork or marble floors like at Stratus, but there was something more valuable: a culture of competence and integrity. I opened my laptop and refined our implementation plan one more time. Not because I had to, but because I wanted our bid to be perfect. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about showing what excellence actually looked like. Ed Whitman was panicking. According to my sources at Stratus, he'd requested an emergency meeting with DoD officials to plead his case personally. He was denied. The procurement process had rules, and CEO desperation wasn't a valid reason to break them. The Stratus board of directors began meeting behind closed doors. Whispers of leadership changes and corrective action spread through the company. My phone lit up with a LinkedIn message from Claire Whitman. "Hey, can we talk? I think there's been a huge misunderstanding." I didn't bother responding. There was no misunderstanding. She had willingly accepted a position she knew she wasn't qualified for, displacing someone with 7 years of experience. Whatever was happening to her now was the natural consequence of that choice. Meanwhile, Phoenix's bid was sailing through the evaluation process. The technical review came back with the highest possible scores. The compliance assessment, using my properly licensed framework, passed without a single question. For the first time in weeks, I slept through the night without waking up angry. Something better was on the horizon. The first public crack in Stratus's facade appeared when a senator's office issued a statement praising Phoenix Systems for their innovative approach to tactical drone development and ethics-first compliance framework. The statement didn't mention Stratus, but the implication was clear. There was a new favorite in the drone space. That same day, Stratus announced that Mike Donovan was retiring to pursue personal interests. The hasty press release thanked him for his many contributions, but named his replacement effective immediately. I knew the truth, of course. Mike hadn't retired. He'd been fired, made the scapegoat for the disasters unfolding at Stratus. It was almost poetic. The man who had callously ended my career was now experiencing the same treatment. David called me into his office to share the news. "Your former boss just got the axe," he said, sliding a tablet with the press release across the desk. I glanced at it and shrugged. Karma works in mysterious ways. "Not that mysterious," David replied with a smile. "Sometimes it just needs a little help from someone who knows what they're doing." The NDA violation Claire had triggered turned into a full-blown legal nightmare for Stratus. The supplier demanded compensation for the exposed strategy document, threatening to go public with details of Stratus's internal disarray if they didn't receive a settlement. Stratus had no choice but to pay. But the terms of the settlement required disclosure to shareholders, which revealed deeper compliance failures throughout the company. Analysts started questioning whether the DoD contract troubles were just the tip of the iceberg. Meanwhile, I received an unexpected invitation. The Federal Aviation Oversight Board requested my testimony about system integrity risks in autonomous drone development. This wasn't just a technical meeting. It was a high-profile opportunity to establish Phoenix Systems as a thought leader in the space. I prepared meticulously, creating a presentation that highlighted the importance of proper compliance frameworks without ever mentioning Stratus by name. I didn't need to drag them through the mud. They were doing that perfectly well on their own. The night before my testimony, I reviewed my notes one last time and thought about how differently things had turned out from what I'd expected. Sometimes getting fired is the best thing that can happen to you. The Stratus board of directors finally moved against Ed Whitman. According to my sources, the meeting was brutal. Ed tried to blame Mike Donovan for the compliance failures. When that didn't work, he tried to defend Claire, claiming she'd been set up to fail by resentful employees. The board wasn't buying it. They presented Ed with a simple choice: resign immediately or be removed and face a shareholder lawsuit for breach of fiduciary duty. He chose to resign, effective immediately. The press release cited health concerns and a desire to spend more time with family. The stock jumped 6% on the news. I learned about it from a text from Priya, who still had friends at Stratus. "Ed's out. The whole executive floor is in chaos." Later that day, a major investment firm published an analysis of the situation. Stratus's current crisis stems from poor succession planning and the removal of key technical talent. Sources indicate the company was warned about this exact scenario months ago, but failed to take corrective action. I printed that analysis and pinned it to my office wall. Not out of spite, but as a reminder. Competence always matters in the end. To my surprise, I was invited to keynote the Defense Innovation Summit, an annual gathering of the top minds and companies in the defense sector. My presentation topic: building resilient, compliant systems for next-generation defense technology. It was the kind of opportunity that came once in a career. I'd be speaking to the very people who made billion-dollar acquisition decisions across the defense industry. I accepted immediately. David was ecstatic. "This puts Phoenix on the map in a way advertising never could," he said. The conference organizers sent over the draft agenda. Right after my keynote, there would be a major contract announcement. I scanned down and saw it. Phoenix Systems was listed as the awardee for the $150 million drone expansion contract. We'd won. Not through connections or nepotism, but through competence and integrity. I closed my office door and allowed myself a moment of pure joy. Everything I'd worked for, everything I'd built, had been validated. And everyone who dismissed me would have to watch it happen in the most public way possible. The day of the summit arrived. I stepped onto the stage in front of hundreds of industry leaders, government officials, and media representatives. As I began speaking about the critical importance of compliance integrity in defense contracting, I spotted a familiar face in the back row. Claire Whitman sat there, pale and tense, probably sent by whatever was left of Stratus's leadership to gather intelligence on their fallen contract. I didn't acknowledge her. I didn't need to. My presentation spoke for itself. Clear, authoritative, visionary. I wasn't just talking about technical frameworks. I was outlining a philosophy of responsibility and excellence that resonated with everyone in the room. When I concluded, the applause was thunderous. Then came the contract announcement. Phoenix Systems awarded the full $150 million Phase 2 drone development program with options for future expansions worth potentially hundreds of millions more. As cameras flashed and hands were shaken, I ended with a single line that wasn't aimed at anyone in particular, but carried a weight everyone felt. Respect and integrity don't show up on a balance sheet, but they decide who survives in this industry. The fallout at Stratus was swift and merciless. Layoffs began the following week, starting with the drone department Claire had briefly led. Longtime employees who had built their careers around the DoD contract found themselves packing up their desks, victims of leadership's catastrophic mistakes. My inbox filled with desperate messages from former colleagues. "Are you hiring? Can we talk about opportunities at Phoenix? I always respected your work, Rachel." I didn't respond to most of them. The ones who had stood by silently while I was pushed out didn't deserve a lifeboat now. But there were a few, those who had shown integrity even when it was difficult, who I forwarded to our HR department with my personal recommendation. One former team leader who had openly questioned my firing reached out. I replied simply, "We only hire people who listen and speak up when something isn't right. Send me your resume." Meanwhile, Claire Whitman disappeared from Stratus's website and LinkedIn. According to rumors, she'd left the country for an extended sabbatical. In reality, she was hiding from the professional damage her brief tenure had caused. Claire didn't give up easily. Every few days, a new email arrived in my inbox from various addresses she created after I blocked her company account. The subject lines grew increasingly desperate. "Please read this. I need to explain. I didn't know what would happen. It wasn't my idea." I deleted each one without reading it. Whatever justification or apology she wanted to offer was too little, too late. She'd willingly participated in pushing me out, happily taking my position despite her lack of qualifications. Now she was facing the consequences of those choices. Her final email had the subject line, "I didn't know." I hovered over the delete button, then paused. For a brief moment I considered reading it, wondering if there was something I didn't understand about what had happened. Then I remembered the look on her face when she walked into my office that first day, carrying her latte, wearing that entitled smile. She hadn't cared about my career or my dignity then. Why should I care about hers now? I hit delete and went back to building something worthwhile at Phoenix. Later that day, my assistant informed me that Claire had applied for an entry-level position at Phoenix. I couldn't help but laugh at the irony. Within months, the drone fiasco at Stratus became a cautionary tale throughout the industry. Recruiters warned their clients about hiring Claire Whitman. Business schools used Stratus as a case study in how not to handle succession planning and intellectual property rights. At a conference, I overheard someone say, Stratus thought they were replacing an employee, but they were really losing their most valuable asset. The story spread, growing more dramatic with each retelling. A junior executive who'd recently joined Phoenix approached me after a meeting one day. "Is it true you planned this from the day they fired you?" he asked, clearly impressed. "That you set them up knowing they'd keep using your system illegally?" I just smiled enigmatically. The truth was both simpler and more complicated. I hadn't planned anything. I'd simply stood up for what was mine and refused to be trampled. The rest was just cause and effect, amplified by Stratus's own arrogance and incompetence. But sometimes, a legend serves a purpose. If my story made companies think twice before discarding loyal, competent employees in favor of nepotism hires, then let the legend grow. A year after my firing, Stratus's interim board made one last desperate attempt. They sent a formal proposal for a strategic partnership between Stratus and Phoenix Systems. The document was filled with vague corporate language about synergies and mutual growth opportunities. Reading between the lines, it was clear what they really wanted: access to my compliance framework and the DoD relationships I'd built. They were offering to pay handsomely for what they'd previously tried to take for free. David left the decision entirely up to me. "They made their bed," he said. "You get to decide if they can crawl out of it." I considered it briefly. A partnership would be profitable for Phoenix. It would give us access to Stratus's remaining resources and client base. From a purely business perspective, it made sense. But some bridges, once burned, should stay that way. Some lessons need to be permanent to be effective. I sent a single line in response: "We don't work with amateurs." The message was clear. There would be no rescue, no second chance. Stratus had made choices that couldn't be undone with money or fancy proposals. 2 years to the day after being fired, I signed Phoenix's newest contract with the Department of Defense, a $300 million, 5-year development program that would cement our position as the leading drone technology provider for the U.S. military. As I walked through our expanded offices, now occupying 3 floors of a downtown building, I saw dozens of engineers and compliance specialists working together seamlessly. Many were former Stratus employees who'd proven their worth and found a better home. The rest were top talent attracted by our growing reputation for excellence and integrity. There was no press release about the contract, no social media victory lap, no revenge quote for the industry blogs. I didn't need any of that. The results spoke for themselves. Stratus still existed, but as a shadow of its former self. They'd sold off their aerospace division and pivoted to commercial applications, struggling to rebuild credibility, one small project at a time. As for me, I had everything I'd ever wanted: challenging work, a team that valued competence over connections, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that I'd not only survived being discarded, I'd thrived because of it. Sometimes getting pushed off a cliff teaches you that you can fly.